William Shakespeare once wrote, "The eyes are the windows to your soul." Welcome everyone to this third part in our series of body parts. The eyes, one of the most difficult items to deal with when creating 3D models because of the iris, the black area of the eye. Most commonly, it would be carved inward as a hole. In ancient times, the iris was not dealt with, simply because the eye was painted. You can see here the head of Hercules, 370 BC. The eyes were not detailed as we would normally expect. In Egyptian times, the eyes were dealt with in a different way. Many times, crystals were used to replicate the eyes or represent the eyes. It has been a challenge over the centuries for sculptors. Even within our software, the Vectric software, the 3D models that accompany it, you can see that there are several approaches to how eyes could be dealt with. Each are slightly different, each present their own problems, and each have their own end results. I'd like to show you my approach on how I deal with eyes. I'm going to open up a new session of the Aspire software, as we normally would do, making sure that the modeling resolution is set to very high, and hit OK. I'm going to be importing some vectors. I'll leave a link down below so that you can access these vectors if you'd like to follow along and try creating your own eye from this video. I import the EPS file, and these are the vectors that we're going to need. A rectangle, a shape for the nose and brow, the eyeball, a cutout area, and a round circle just for the suggestion of where the iris would be. Our first item is the rectangle. This is going to be a domed shape with a tilt, and this is going to represent the side of the face where the eye is. In this case, the left-hand side where the nose is will be higher than the right-hand side, simply to show the curvature of the face. So I create my component, choose to tilt from right to left. The left will be slightly higher. I adjust the tilt just to about 4 or 5%, just to give it a little roundness to the shape of the face. That will help the eye sit more appropriately and look more natural. The next component would be the area for the nose and the brow. I'm not too concerned about the actual shape of this or height of it, because I know we've already created the nose in a previous video that we're going to be bringing in. This component just simply acts as a reference point and a little bit of blending from one component to the other. Our next component is going to be the eyeball. It's just an oval with a rounded shape. Nothing more and nothing less. And these are the components that we're going to need to start with. I'll take my face and my brow and create a copy of the visible model from that, and we'll go into our sculpting tab. I want to smooth out the area right where the brow and nose line meet the face part. A smooth transition in many cases works the best. I I have my eye, but now I need to make the eyelids. The best way that I have found to do it, because I need to maintain that curvature of the eye, is to simply use the offset model option, just by almost a half of an inch. It'll create a new component, slightly larger in all directions. That's the new component. I'm going to select that new component and my cutout, my two arcs that have been joined together to form a closed vector. And I'm going to delete everything inside of that. Turn the eye back on, and now I can see I have the upper and lower eyelid. Very quick, very easy way to create these components. And as usual, create a component from the visible model and go into the sculpting tab. The eye is typically slanted slightly. The inner part of the eye towards the nose is lower in the Y than the outer end, slightly on an angle. Of course, if I use the smudge tool, I can create those little tear ducts on the inside of the eye. It's just a bit of sculpting, not a lot. Creating the iris presents the biggest challenge that has plagued sculptors forever. Here's one approach. I can choose my vector and choose my eye component and cut it apart. I can lower the base height of that iris slightly, or a lot, as you've seen previously in the images that I've presented. If I'm happy with the depth of the iris, I can take that into the sculpting tool and simply smooth out that area where the iris has now been reduced or lowered into the component. I can also remove some material to make that indent of the iris a little bit more pronounced. Many times this will be trial and error. Your choice of what you would like the eye to look like. That's one approach. Let's take another look to see how we can accomplish this. I have my eye, my original, and instead of having the circle and cut the component apart, I can simply go into the sculpting tab and reduce or remove part of the eyeball itself to create the iris. Traditionally, the iris was not there, as I've said previously, because the eyeball was painted. Michelangelo came up with a technique of having a little bit of a drop in the eye. You can see it here in this image of David's face. I don't know if he actually created or invented this technique, but it's recognized as one of the earliest times that this technique of adding that extra part to the eye was visible. It represents the glare of light from the sun or a light source bouncing off of the iris itself. And this technique continues even till today. Here's the eyeball of the statue from Mount Rushmore of Thomas Jefferson. It's not quite as pointed as Michelangelo's, but the end result is the same. It's the little spark of light. What could be done at this point is just to use the smudge tool and drag a bit of the pixels or the component to create that little V shape. That little glimmer of the eyeball. and smooth it out. So there's another approach on how an eye could look. We can continue using our sculpting tools to finish the area around the eye, simply by making sure our face is turned on, as well as the eyeball itself, creating a component from that and going into the sculpting tool. More smoothing, more adjusting. You'll know when it's right, when it looks appropriate for you and the picture. I'm going to do a bit of smudging just to make the brow look a little bit more natural. This is where you get to play artist and decide how you want the end result to look. I can smudge out the side of the nose if I'd like, but in the end I know I'm going to be using the nose that we created in the previous video, so I'm not too concerned about it. This is just to show you the process of what you can do to actually create a face. As an option, I can add extra weight to underneath the eye to represent the bags that maybe are under the eyes. Somebody relatively tired or old. The nice thing about the software is if I don't like it, I can choose the number 5 option to undo what I had previously created and start again. This time, let's have a little less strength, a little bit more smoothness, and add a little bit more height to the Z, simply to start to develop the cheekbone. And a little bit more smoothing. So it really wasn't too complicated. A couple of basic components, a little trick with the offset model to create the eyelids, and some sculpting. Again, remember to take your time. It takes a while for the computer to recalculate the pixels. I'm going to adjust the right-hand side of this eye just a little bit. And let's take a look at it. We can rotate it around the axis. Looking at it from the side, I probably will need to increase the thickness of the brow, because typically the brow would sit taller than the eyeball itself. Or I can reduce the eyeball if I wanted. Let's try this again with something else. You remember our original picture of the face that I was told that I couldn't create in Aspire. I call him Fred. Fred the head. I just highlight the eye section of the face, and I create a vector of what I think the profile would look like of that area. I'm going to create an arc to represent that part of the face, and I'm going to then generate a component based upon that. I have that arc, I have my nose area and brow, my eyeball, and a slight dish. These are the vectors that I've created, including a little bit of the extra meat that's around the eye for the eyelids and the little bag or extra fleshy part of the eye. So let's see if we can recreate this section of that picture. I choose my vertical vectors as my rails for a 2-rail sweep. Choose the shape that I think the face looks like. The higher part on the left is where the nose is, and the lower part on the right goes down towards the ear. This will be the basic shape of the face, I think. I take a look at it, and I think it could work. My next set of vectors are the nose area, the brow, and the oval for a dish shape. I create a component. Not sure how high I want it in the Z, the angle. It'll be rounded. This is the area where we'll place that nose that we've created in an earlier video. I select my oval for a slight dish. This component helps me just to understand where the eye is going to sit. A slight recess. I'm going to create a component from the visible model, and of course go into the sculpting tool just to smooth some things out. This part of the sculpting should be quick and easy. You don't have to be as precise or as accurate. You just want to lose some of the sharp edges. Now let's take a look at the eye itself, the eyeball. It's rather different than the original approach we showed earlier, simply because the picture is different. These are the vectors that I'm going to use. But if we look at our original picture, you can see how the eye undulates down and up and down into the iris and up again. I've created a vector that I think represents that. Well, only half of it. Simply because I'm going to use the turn and spin tool within the software. And that will generate a circular component that represents the eye. I don't need the whole eye, I only need the part that's visible. So I select my closed arced vectors and delete everything outside, or keep everything inside. Not quite sure the terminology, but I want to keep everything inside of that closed vector. I'm going to smooth it ever so slightly. My angles were a little too sharp. And I'm going to change the shape height a little bit as well. This is what I think the eye looks like from the picture, from Fred. Sometimes the names get a little long, so I need to go in and just rename it. Let's take a look at the eyeball that we've just created and the face. I need to change the component property to add, so that it sits in that dish shape that we've created. Now for the extra parts, the eyelids, or the fleshy part around the eye. I have the vector for the top eyelid, and it's simply going to be a rounded shape. But let's first look at the picture itself. You can see where I've drawn the vectors to match the extra parts around the eye based upon the picture. So it's a rounded shape, not too much, just a slight roundness to it. No magic numbers, just something that looks appropriate. I create a new component, and I'm going to choose the lower closed vector that I drew. And again, that will be a rounded shape, just a little bit. If I'm happy with that, I click Apply, and my last component, the shape directly below the eyeball. I see this more as a pyramidal shape, a pointed shape. I do know that I'm going to be smoothing all of these out. So I'm not that concerned about the exact number of height or base height. I think about it, but I don't worry about it. I select my 3 components. They'll need to be baked together. And then go into the sculpting tool. I'm going to speed up the video just a bit. We know the process. I smooth it out. I add my eye back in and my face. And it's starting to look like I thought it would. The eye looks a little bit too proud in the Z, so I'm going to reduce the base height of it. I uncheck the highlight selected components simply because I'd like to make sure I can see what it all looks like in a natural shape or natural state. New level, create a component from the visible model. Go into the sculpting tool and a little bit of smoothing. So it's similar to our first eye that we've created, but also slightly different, simply because Fred looks different than the other eye that we've created. There's the original picture of the eye and our component. I think we're getting pretty close. I could create a skin, a component from the picture, by clicking on our Create Component from Bitmap option, and apply that to the top of our model, adding a bit of texture to the face. I'm going to do a bit of trimming of our base shape simply by drawing a vector around our picture and keeping everything inside of it, so it's nice and tidy. I can choose my component skin and go into my properties and adjust the shape height. This will smooth it out as well as either using the smoothing tool and or going into the sculpting tool. So you have a couple different ways to smooth things out. Reducing the shape height will reduce everything down. Using the smoothing tool within the sculpting option allows you to selectively smooth areas out. This skin adds just that little bit of texture that helps me understand where I may need to do a bit more sculpting. For example, the eyebrows need a bit of work. So, there's our eye. A bit more smoothing. Again, this can go on for several hours. And let's compare. There's the picture. Several hours later of sculpting, there's the end result. Pretty close. It's not exact like the picture, but I'm rather happy with it. It doesn't take a lot. It just takes some time. I hope you've learned a bit about how to create eyes through this process. I do hope you give it a try. We have parts now for the mouth, the nose, and the eye. In our next lesson, we're going to take a look at the ear. It's a rather simple approach, and as usual, there are many different varieties that you can attempt. If you want to learn more about the software, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to click on the bell to be notified of our next video. And as always, if you have a question, send me an email, mm@mezalick.com. And if you'd like to help, consider buying me a coffee. The link is down below in the description. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Enjoy.